Let me let me pin myself here. And here we go. Is class number Faith and Cow, number 96. And what we are talking about today, we're going to be probably talking about for a couple of weeks because it's such a rich story. It's got so much interesting stuff in it. Is Purim. Purim is a month from now, less than a few days, less than a month. And so, I could talk for more than a month about Purim. It's just a wonderful story. This is a little detail in the story, but hopefully this is a meaningful thing. And I got something out of it, so I'm going to share it with people. I guess you know the basic plot, as we know, that there was this anti-Semite named Haman, and he got a hold of the king, and he got the king's attention, and he spread a plot against the Jews, and he told them, that they're weird, and played on anti-Semitic. There are certain people who are spread out through all your country, and the laws are not the same as our laws, and they're a dangerous fifth column, and got Ahasuerus to pass his decree to wipe out all the Jews, men, women, and children, and every place of his kingdom, which in that case was the whole world, because Ahasuerus ruled 127 nations from Hodu ad Kush. Basically, was to wipe out the entire Jewish people. So Mordechai hears about this, goes to Esther, this is our story, and says, you got to go in and you got to get this plot reversed. And this is probably why you were picked to be the queen. Why else are you in the palace except to save the Jewish people? This is your moment, Esther. So, okay. So Esther says, you got a problem here. The guy, as I said last year, paranoid, schizophrenic, whatever. And, he passed the law. And he said anybody who comes in without permission ends up a head shorter, unless he sticks out his sharvit, his staff, to accept the person. And I haven't been asked to come to see the king for 30 days. And so it's really dangerous. And I will die, and there'll be no hope. Mordechai says, this is why you were chosen. You got to go in. So Esther comes back with this argument. It's an interesting argument. And she tells Mordechai, she says, okay, I'll go in. But you have to raid, and collect every single Jew from men, women, and children. And you have to assemble them, and they have to fast for 3 days. And after the end of 3 days, I and my maids will also fast for 3 days, and then we'll go in to see the king. And what will happen will happen. I will try and get his favor. And Mordechai agrees. Mordechai agrees to fast for 3 days. Now, one of the things you may not know, one of the obstacles that Mordechai had to this plan was that these 3 days of fasting actually overlapped with Passover. We think of Purim and Purim happening at Purim time, but Purim time was the date that the Jews were supposed to be wiped out in battle. But Haman threw his dice and planned to kill the Jews a year before that, almost a year before that, right before Passover. And so the story got out right before Passover, the 13th day of Nisan, which was 2 days before the start of Passover. So Mordechai went to Esther on the 13th of Nisan, 2 days before Passover, and said, you got to go in. And Esther's saying, yeah, but we're going to have to fast for 3 days. Now that works out that the day before Passover, the day before Passover, the day before Passover, and the day of Passover would be fast days, which means no Seder. So Mordechai says, we can't do this. What do you mean? It's Passover. You're not supposed to fast on Passover. And Esther came back and said, if you don't do this, there'll be no Jewish people, and there will be no more Passover anymore. And Mordechai heard this, and he agreed that we will fast because fast to do tshuva. So there's an interesting detail that the Lubavitcher Rebbe brings out. And one of the things that Esther said was, go and collect all the Jews. And we have to understand, why did she say all of the Jews? I mean, the normal way of speaking is like, let's say, for example, you're the teacher of a classroom. And you say, class, tomorrow we're going on a field trip. That sort of implies everybody in the class. You don't have to say all of the class. Maybe you have to say everyone's going in the class except for Sam in the corner there. He's misbehaved and he doesn't go. You make an exception for him, but you don't have to usually have to indicate that there's a class trip, and it means that everybody in the class goes. It may seem sort of minor, but actually it's the Megillah. Each word is precise. You have to, when you listen to the Megillah, you have to hear every single word. And so if it says all, there must be some difference of opinion between Mordechai and Esther. That Mordechai felt maybe there are some people who shouldn't be part of this, and Esther felt it has to be everybody. Why would Mordechai think some people are not worthy? So we have to get back to the idea of why did this decree happen? I know that the reason is because there's anti-Semites in the world. There's Hamans and there's Achashverosh's and there's Persians that hate us and Iranians that hate us. Yeah, we know that, but there's a spiritual reason behind all of this. Why would the Jews deserve? What did they do wrong to have such a thing decreed against them? Because if you understand that, then you understand how the Jews actually turned it around and proved that this doesn't apply to them. So there's different discussions about this. What most of them say, the Gemara says, it's because the Jews went to the feast of Achashverosh. So remember, at the beginning of the story, Achashverosh threw a party. He threw a party for 180 days, and he had a lot of drinking going on. And at the end of the party, he invited his queen Vashti to come dance on the tables, and she didn't want to. And then she was put to death. And they had to find a new queen, but all the Jews also came to that party too, and that was something was wrong with coming to that party. The rabbis in the Gemara, they say that they had pleasure, that they delighted from that feast of that wicked person. So some people explain it very simply, and they say that, you know what, they ate non-kosher food. Okay. It's happened before. It's happened afterwards. It's not a death penalty for eating non-kosher food. Okay, it's not good to eat kosher food. So maybe Mordechai felt that those people in Shushan, they shouldn't be because they celebrated the festival. The Lubavitcher Rebbe says it has to be understood on a deeper level, and that is that in a certain way, the Jews turned their back on their mission. In other words, they had said, basically, they were saying that, we've been invited to the White House to the inauguration, and we get to get pictures with the new president and so forth. Wow, we're finally accepted. We're not the weirdos. We're not strangers anymore. We're on the main. We're part of the establishment and so forth. We're finally accepted, and this is a very strong desire of Jewish people to finally feel like we're part of the rest of the world. And it affects many people very, very deeply, and they hide all signs of their Judaism, or many signs of the Judaism, or they'll do anything to try and cover up their Judaism because they feel somehow weird and unaccepted, and therefore they just want to be blend in and assimilate into the the Persian culture, whatever it is. And no, we have a mission. We are unique and we are different, and we're not just here for the ride. And we do stick out. Even when we try not to stick out, we stick out. Sorry. I'm thinking Monica Lewinsky. She still stuck out as a Jew. She might have thought that it was the most wonderful thing being in the Clinton White House, and her parents thought it was wonderful, and everything else was wonderful and so forth. And it was not the place for a Jewish girl. That was not the place where she belonged. Oh boy, no. So that was a problem. So Mordechai felt that there were some Jews that were maybe you don't include those Jews. Esther had a different opinion. Esther felt that all the Jews, deep down inside, at their core, really want to serve God. And you're going to find out. You're going to find out. They're going to. You ask them and you question them and you say, you know what? No. We're accepting the Torah. We're accepting our mission. And just because on the external side, they don't seem to be so excited or enthusiastic and so forth, doesn't mean that there isn't a fire inside, buried underneath, a coal like a spark in and an ember, but it's inside. The coal mug look black, but there's a spark inside, and there's the fire. And that Jew really does really does feel that they're special, and really is inside. And so she said, please, all Jews, every single one. Now, why Esther was different than Mordechai? Because Esther actually knew the challenges that the Jews of that generation had. Why? Because when she was taken to the palace, she was told by her uncle, by Mordechai, don't say that you're Jewish. So therefore, she was in a pickle. What's she going to eat? What's for breakfast? The Persians didn't exactly have kosher banquets there and so forth. She was supposed to eat she's the queen. She's supposed to eat at all the meals. She's the queen. She's supposed to eat part of the meals. She had to make a whole ruse somehow that she's vegetarian, or, you know what, she grew up in Mordechai's house. She was not Jewish, but she got used to Jewish food. And if you change her diet, it was going to change, it's going to affect her. She's going to have food sensitivities and so forth. And therefore, she had to keep coming up with excuses somehow to really fight and hide this whole fact that she kept kosher the whole time that she was in the palace. It was not an easy task. So she knew the challenges of Jews living in an assimilated environment and keeping kosher and everything else related to keeping all the Jewish laws. It was very, very difficult. And therefore, she could empathize with those people. And she knew that externally they may, for whatever reason, slip. But you know what? They still want it. They still connect. They still feel Jewish. The rabbis explained that this is sort of like in the Gemara, it talks about the way that you have to look at another Jew or somebody else. There's a discussion between two of the great houses of rabbis called Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel oftentimes got into discussions, and between the discussions, you have a very illuminating idea of Jewish thought and how it's a full spectrum of Jewish thought. This discussion happens to circle around the idea of a discussion in the Gemara Ksubos about going to a wedding for a friend. And the line, you hear it, there's a song. They often play it at weddings. And I'm going to play it here for you. Maybe I should just share the video because it's cute. Share screen, and can I share the video also? Share sound. Good. Okay, well, let's go there. Yeah. Okay. Let me close that out. Stop share. Do we stop the share? Can you hear me again? Everybody thumbs up? Yep. So what he said was, Ketzad Meraklim Lifnei Akala. How do you dance in front of the Kala? How do you dance in front of the bride? And the answer is, Kala Na'a V'Chasuda. Kala that's beautiful and kind. That's my translation. Gracious and attractive. The song leaves out the discussion and the debate. The question is, how do you celebrate at another person's wedding? How do you celebrate somebody else's, the kala, their celebration and so forth? So you go to the wedding and you're supposed to say, hey, she's the most beautiful girl in the world. I mean, this is the kala. That's Hillel's opinion. Kala never chasuda. Every kala is a beautiful and attractive and kind. And Beis Hillel says, wait a second. From Devar Sheker out to Teirchak, you should stay away from lies. What if she's not so beautiful? What if she's blind? You have to tell it like it is. You don't have to say everything bad about her, but just only talk about the good parts but don't lie. It's not right to lie. it's not Jewish. And that's an interesting discussion, How do you do it? Somebody goes out, they spend a lot of time, they buy a beautiful dress, and you think it's disgusting. What do you tell your friend, and so forth? You just spend a lot of time, they bought it, they liked it, and so forth. Do you tell them like it is? Like you're gonna embarrass yourself and don't do it, or something? Or do you tell them, you make up a little white lie because they obviously they like it. So Beis Hillel is saying, it's a very deep idea, actually. It sounds simple, but it's a very deep idea. Beis Shammai is saying, you got to tell the truth. Beis Hillel is saying, yeah, step out of your perceptions of your truth. You may be right, but they think that this is the most beautiful person in the world. That's why they're marrying them. They think that's the most beautiful dress. And you step out of your limited and narrow perspective and step into their shoes and see how they look at things. And when you start looking at how they look at things, then you can also appreciate, maybe maybe that is the most beautiful person in the world. And you know what? There is a truth to it. Esther was saying, in order to relate to another person, in order to connect with another person, you have to empathize with them, and you have to experience what they do. Mordechai, you don't experience what the Jewish people are experiencing because you're in Sanhedrin and you get kosher food every day and you can go to kosher restaurants. I'm experiencing what the Jews are actually experiencing here because I have to live with the non-Jews and they have to struggle to earn a living and they have to live in assimilated lives. And therefore, I can associate with them and I can feel for them and I can bond with them. And therefore, I understand that, in this gullus environment, the most important thing to be able to be a teacher or to relate to another person who's going through a trauma or is having troubles and so forth is to be able to identify with them. Then you can actually talk to them and lift them up. If you don't do that, you can't actually affect another person. This is an important lesson. We all have to learn this over and over again. A certain way, we have to actually go inside the other person and we have to be able to really, for them to listen to you, you have to be able to say, I feel for you and I feel of you. I know what you're talking about. I do. I too have a little bit of that. Maybe not exactly the same thing, but something similar to what you're going through. And therefore, I can relate to you and I can talk to you about that. There's a story that's told about the second Lubavitcher Rebbe, whose name was Dov Ber, and he was the son of the Alter Rebbe, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe. He was a very sensitive child, and he was always involved in holy matters from very young age, and he was not a bit isolated and so forth like that. But when he became Rebbe, people would come to him with their problems, and they would have yechidas, one-on-one conversations with him. One time, a young man came into for a private conversation, and when he walked out, the Mittler Rebbe said, "You're going to have to stop the rest of the line. I can't see anybody else." And I don't. And he started a fast, and he fasted for 3 days, and people listened at the door could hear him crying and weeping. And after 3 days, finally, he said people can start coming back in again, and he called first back in that guy. And he spoke to him, and then he started seeing other people. One of his sons went over to them and said, "What was this all about? Why did you have to stop seeing people? And why are you crying and weeping? And what was going on for those 3 days?" So the Mittler Rebbe explained. He said, in order for me to give the person advice, I have to get into their clothes and I have to experience what they're doing. And this guy told me something that was so outrageous and so awful that he had done that I couldn't even see in myself that at all. I saw no aspect of that. I don't know. I didn't know what to say to him. But I know that if he came to me, there must be something like that because God wouldn't have arranged it for him to come to me if I didn't have to do it myself. So I had to look and I had to pray and I had to cry and I had to fast until I could find a smidgen of a smidgen, something like that I was doing wrong. And then I could talk to him. That's a Rebbe. A Rebbe is a conduit. He's a connector. He makes a connection between you and God. Because relating directly to God is difficult, and therefore a human being is some model we can relate to, but it's a human being, but it's nevertheless a clear, transparent connection. It's not an intermediary that separates. It's one that connects you to it. So he has to also be able to relate at the human level to what was going on in a human level problem. That is what Esther was really teaching us in this little one line. It was the way that you look at other Jews and the way you look at yourself and the way that you interact with other people. You have to use your powers of empathy and your feelings for them, and you have to get inside their life and understand what they're going through. And then you can actually, then they can listen to you. But if you're coming off as the Mr. Know-it-all and have all great sort of answers and stuff like that, then you can't really answer them. And I'll finish with a little story that Rabbi that I heard also, maybe two stories if I have the time, but one story at least. There is a famous psychologist. Too bad Amy's not here. Oh, Amy said she was going to be away. There's a famous psychologist. I never heard of him before. But I was watching one of the Rabbi YY's forums, and he brought this guy up. He's not Jewish. His name is Bessel van der Kolk.
Oh, he's a trauma specialist.
Trauma specialist, exactly. Not Jewish, Massachusetts area, famous for writing a book, The Body Keeps the Score. And they had like an hour-long conversation. It was over my head. I didn't really connect to it. But he brought out one point that was very interesting. Rabbi YY asked him, he said, how do you choose a good therapist? Is it the schools he went to? Is it his ability to listen? What is the most essential ingredient? And this guy said an interesting thing. He said it has, and he's very well read and very well trained and all this other kind of stuff. He says there's nothing to do with the training, and there's nothing to do with how on top of this technical skills he is or so forth like that. The most important thing that the therapist has to have is the ability to be able to, as what we just saying, see it from the other person's viewpoint, to relate to the other person, to feel the other person's pain, to connect with that person, and to be able to put himself outside, and not to come from a place of I'm the expert and you're my patient, but rather that we're in this together and we really feel that we're part of it. It's like the statement that they said, how do you choose a good rabbi? So a rabbi is as I said, like an airline pilot. Why an airline pilot? So it's interesting, you check out a surgeon, you put your life in his hands, you check out his background, his education, his how much he knows, how much he's what he's done, what his track record is. You look at him at med scores or whatever and so forth. Nobody ever does that when they put their hands in their lives and get on the plane. Why is that? The answer is simple enough. Because the pilot also was on the plane. The doctor can go home at night if he makes a mistake, and he feels bad, but you know what? He's not with you like the pilot. The pilot's on the plane. The pilot makes a serious mistake on the plane. He's involved in it. So you can trust him. You can trust him 100%. This is an important lesson. This is how we trust. This is how we build the trust. And then the trust in ourselves too. So I'll finish it with a story I heard in Crown Heights. I loved it so much, I'm going to stick it in. I think it connects to this too. And that was, it's not necessarily a true story, but it's an interesting story. So there was once this man who was a very good businessman, and he was doing very well. And then all of a sudden the business went bad, and he started losing money, and the business went further down, and he finally had to sell everything, and his family hated him, and he was sitting on a bench in Manhattan in Central Park, and he didn't know what to do with himself, and he was considering whether to end it all and so forth. And all of a sudden he looks up, and on the bench there's a guy sits down next to him in a bathrobe and slippers, and he says, can I talk to you? And the guy says, I don't really want to talk. I'm not interested in. And he says, no. I trust me. I want to hear your story. So for some reason, the guy tells him the story, and the guy in the bathrobe says, listen, actually, I'm the personal agent, secretary of, the way the guy told it this time. He said it was originally what the story was Rockefeller, but now he's changed it, updated it to what's his name? Jeff Bezos, okay? And he has an apartment, and he saw you up there from there, and he sent me down to talk to you. And he said, you know what? If the guy checks out, he said, here's a check, $10 million. Bezos trusts you. He knows that you can get back on your feet, and so forth. Take the check and restart your business. The guy goes, really? He says, yeah, Jeff Bezos sent me down here. I'm his agent. So, okay, he takes the check. He doesn't cash it. He's so impressed. Somebody trusts him. He calls up one of his old friends, he gets a room with a computer and a telephone, and he starts dealing in businesses, calling his old friends, saying you have something to sell. He starts selling it direct online and so forth. And by the end of the day, he spent his whole time there. He didn't even get back to his family. He didn't even get time to get to the bank, but he made $400,000, and he realized it's enough to deal with for that day. So he goes the next day and the next day and the next day. And pretty soon after, oh, I forgot one important point. He was supposed to pay back this $10 million loan 1 year to the day. So after 1 year to the day, he goes back to Central Park. He starts looking, and lo and behold, the guy in the bathrobe is there again. So he goes over to them and says, I didn't even cash the check, but I made enough money. I can give you back the check right now. So right in the middle of the conversation, a bunch of guys grab him, put this guy with this the guy with the bathrobe in a stretcher, and they say, "Is this guy bothering you?" I put him in and they say, "No, we're just having a nice conversation." He says, "Well, this guy, he just escaped from the 8th floor of Cornell Mental Hospital, and he goes around and he tells people that he's got this check from Jeff Bezos, and we were wondering, did he do that with you too?" The point of the story.
So the moral of the story is that he was showing confidence
God
in
believes
them,
in
and
us.
that
It's Adar. He wants us to succeed. We do have the confidence. We do have the backing of the most important thing. We have to also look at ourselves with a generous eye and realize that undersized, we have tremendous powers inside ourselves. It's Adar. There is an unlimited, there's a power in the month of Adar, because of Purim. They even say push off court cases for this month, because you have no idea how successful you can be in this month. You have no idea how much your inner power is. The Jews had no idea that they would be able to overturn the entire situation in one day, from complete darkness to the biggest holiday, as far as the Lubavitch Rebbe is concerned, in the calendar. In one day, it all changed over miraculously, and no Jews were affected. This is the month. This is the time. And you know what? The $10 million is just, what was missing wasn't the $10 million. It was just the belief in oneself and the ability to accomplish. So that was the lesson. It was an interesting end of the Shabbos, and I like the story. And now I have to live it. And that's my challenge. And I'll turn it over to Shalom Yehudis, and she'll continue with our
Very wonderful story.
it's a good story. Thank you, Yechezkel Shimon. Yasher Koach. Is there anything we can do to turn around world events in the month of Adar?
Mr. Putin?
From the micro to the macro, we only have a sphere of influence as big as we have. I'm not sitting in, and I'm not sure even if those people who sit in the National Security Council have that much power in the situation either, and so forth. Being inside the Air Force, I see how it works and so forth, and I'm not sure that's where the fulcrum, or as the military people call it, the center of gravity for the mission is, and so forth. It begins with ourselves. Transform ourselves, and we transform the world. We start little pieces. My wife asked me, do I have these? And yes, I have.
That's a good answer.
Videos here. This is the first one.
Okay, just leave it.
And
like
this
that.
is the second
Leave
one.
it like, no.
Okay.
Okay. Look, leave it
Okay,
this
and
one
you
up.
can do
Okay,
share.
Thank you.
Okay.
I just shared.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
thank you. Yasher Koach.
Thank you. Okay, good. Hello. Hi, Emily. Hi, sorry.
Hi, dear. I have to leave a little early.
Hi, Molly. Sorry, you're muted. You're muted. Sorry.
Hi.
You're trying to speak, but you're muted. Okay, good.
Hi.
Okay, hi, everybody. Now, as Molly, I forgot to tell you, so I'll say it now. As Molly suggested, a very good suggestion, we're dedicating this class to the peace and safety of the Ukraine, and for the best results for the Jews there, and absolute safety for the Jews there. Molly, how many Jews did you say are there?
Over 200,000, I heard. I know.
200,000. So,
Yeah.
So anyway,
for all the people.
that's what our class tonight is dedicated to.
Yes.
And does anybody want to say anything before we start?
It is amazing to me how every few decades there is a human being who is so grandiose in their perception of being able to control the world that they They threaten life.
That's a good observation.
Thank you.
Interesting observation.
You know, like people think that because technology advances, that human nature advances. It's really not true. Human nature advances the more a person applies Torah and mitzvahs to their life, and that's the only advance. People become primitive at the drop of a hat. You know, Germany was considered the most sophisticated country of its time, the most well developed, the most they were just, you know, they had developed themselves
Intelligent,
broad-minded, and we see what happened. So, and the world was silent also. The rest of the intelligent world was silent. So, with a few exceptions. So anyway, I'm going to start by saying the four things that I always say because they're very important. Number one, we're in a unique time. And the more we embrace the fact that the understanding that we are in a unique time, the more we'll change ourselves and the world. We're in a unique time. Why do I say that? Because the Lubavitch Rebbe told us that that the redemption of the world and the Jewish people has already begun. And the walls of exile, you know, it doesn't feel like we're in exile. We live in a free country. But as long as we're not living with the entire world saturated with an understanding of Hashem and mindful of Hashem's presence, then we're in something called exile. But the walls of exile are crumbling. And we're going to talk tonight about, there's more evidence that the walls are crumbling. So stay tuned. And the second thing that I like to say is that we were all handpicked to be here at this amazing juncture in human history. Number three, we were given all the tools we need to navigate this time. We were given our guidebook, the Torah. We were given the mitzvahs, which are power tools to transform ourselves and the world. And we were and we have tremendous leaders, the Lubavitch Rebbe, like Moshe in his time. And finally, what we're doing tonight actively advances the unfolding of the redemption. The Lubavitch Rebbe said that there's no way to speed it up more than by learning about it. So that's what we're doing. So, so here I'll start out with the remarkable times that we're in, with evidence that the walls of Gullus are they're crumbling. I see it all over, but I see it all over. But I'll talk about one of the things. Let's see if I can pull it up. Okay, you know, you guys have all heard. If you listened a few times, you've all heard me talk about the amazing transformation in Russia, and and the Lubavitcher Rebbe predicted it before it happened. He knew it would happen before Gorbachev ever dreamed of doing what he was doing. Gorbachev himself told Professor Herman Branover, when Professor Herman Branover told him after Gorbachev was already retired, and he traveled to Israel on one of his state tours. Herman Branover told him, "Would you like me to tell you a story about yourself?" And Gorbachev said yes. And Professor Branover said, the day Mr. Gorbachev took office, the day you took office, Lubavitch Rebbe called me and told me to get ready. The Jews of Russia are coming out. And I didn't believe it was so far-fetched. And I checked all the newspapers, and everybody said that Gorbachev would be a hardliner, that it would be worse for the Jews, worse for everybody. But you see that what the Lubavitcher Rebbe said the day you got into office was correct. You did let the Jews go. And Gorbachev answered him, and I heard this from Branover himself. I heard it directly from Branover himself. Branover said, Gorbachev turned to him and said, "I would like to meet such a man who knew more about what I was going to do than I myself knew, because at that point, the day I took office, I had no idea I would ever do such a thing." So anyway, so this is part of that saga. We know that Russia was a horrible place throughout the 1900s for the Jewish people. After the communists took over, it got not better but worse, and it became a criminal act to do anything Jewish. It was considered is considered a violation of a revolutionary thing. They to go a mikvah was an illegal thing. Keeping kosher was illegal. Having a Jewish wedding was totally illegal. It had to be, if you wanted a wedding to be done in a Jewish way, it had to be totally hidden. Barely a minyan, just a minyan, and in complete secrecy. A bris milah had to be a brit had to be conducted in utmost secrecy, or you could be sent to Siberia. A friend of mine who grew up in Russia, her Hebrew teacher for teaching Hebrew, just Hebrew, it's not funny. He was sent to Siberia. When he came back, she couldn't recognize him. It was so awful. This was their reality. Their reality. Parents were too afraid to tell their children that they're Jewish. Parents kept it from their children because what if the child says something? So we all know, as the Rebbe predicted and as happened, the gates of Russia opened. The Russian Jews were not only allowed to go, but the Kremlin, but Russia assisted. They gave them money. They helped them emigrate to Israel. They since then, it's crazy. It's just crazy. The Kremlin was when an Israeli official was visiting, the Kremlin was kosher to make a meal for him. The Russian marching band was participated in Purim parades. The former communist meeting halls were given over for Passover seders. It's just crazy. It's absolutely, the walls of exile are absolutely crumbling. So now I'm going to open up the, share screen. And so here we go. Okay, let's share the screen now. So we're on the, they're on the brink of war, right? They're on the brink of war in that area, and a bunch of former Russian generals, people who won, they're people who won. They won top awards, the most prestigious military awards in the nation. They joined together on a mission, and they went to Lubavitch to daven at the graves of two of the Lubavitcher Rebbe's who were buried there. And how is it discovered? There were some Jews. There's a lot of Jews who go to Lubavitch to pray at the graves of these past Lubavitch Rebbe's. And they said, "What are you doing here?" And they said, "Well, we heard it's such an effective place to pray at, and we want to pray that there should be no war." And so they came. Can you imagine? They're the highest. They're all retired, but the highest decorated. They're among the highest decorated Russian generals and things like that who are alive now. And they went to the Kavarim. They went to the graves, and they prayed there. Here's a list of the guys who went.
That's amazing.
Can you send that link? Can you send us that link?
Okay. They went on the 33rd anniversary of Russia's withdrawal from Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. Isn't that interesting? And even though they participated in that war, they thought this was an auspicious time, the time when Russia pulled back. This is an auspicious time to pray for peace. And who lives in Lubavitch today? There's a few people who live. Not many people live there. There was a Jewish population was completely decimated by Hitler, and so here they are davening at the grave. It's remarkable, right? It's just incredible. And in that country, these people, their predecessors, they were responsible for stepping on Judaism to such an extent. It was absolutely remarkable. But so you can see that it should enter their heads. What do we have to do? We're in a crisis. Let's go daven at those Rebbe's graves. Let's go to Lubavitch. Is that incredible? It's just like, wow.
Was that just recently?
It just happened. It was like this week. You can.
Oh my goodness. That's really a miracle in itself.
It's a miracle in itself. So anyway, so the walls of exile are crumbling. The world is changing. I was just in Crown Heights this weekend, and the Shabbos, and even Crown Heights. The walls of exile are crumbling. You know, in Crown Heights, everybody's close to the Rebbe, right? Everybody's like very, very dedicated to the Rebbe. Everybody was in awe and is in awe of the Rebbe. And yet there was not massive, there was a strong element of division. There's just like there's division all over in the world. There's even division in Lubavitch. And what's the major division? Do you tell the world that the Rebbe is Mashiach, even despite what happened in 1994? Or do you just keep it to yourself because they're going to think you're crazy? And there's and even what the two groups study are different. The people who proclaim, who say, no, I'm sorry, the Rebbe is Mashiach. The Rebbe told us that he's Mashiach. The Rebbe was never wrong. He hinted broadly. The Rebbe was never wrong in any of the public prophecies that he made. And the Rebbe said that that the leader of the generation, the Jewish leader of the generation, is like Jewish leader of the generation is like the Evan Hashasiyah, like the foundation stone. And there's such a thing as the if you go to Israel, if you go on the Temple Mount, it's believed that it's that stone. There's a stone in the middle of the what is it called? The big mosque up there, Dome of the Rock. They call it the Dome of the Rock. There's a big rock in the middle, and that rock is central to Jewish history, central to the world's history. And the Rebbe says that the leader of the generation is not like the 10 Commandments, which were hidden away, and they're hidden away in tunnels underneath Jerusalem. The head of the generation, the Nasi Ador, is like the Evan Hashasiyah. Nothing can change it, not even burial can't change it. So anyway,
what can't you change?
You can't change the foundation stone. It is eternal and never undergoes a change. Even the grave does not change it. Meaning that if such a thing would happen as what happened, the Rebbe was buried. Even that has no control over him. That's what the Rebbe was saying 2 years before 1994. So I want to go from there to talk a little bit about something Haskell Shimon said last week. He was talking about an expression that is at the end of the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, the end of the practical part, the day-to-day laws. It ends with a statement, Tov Lev Mishta Tamid. And we're in Elul, and we're at Tov Lev. Who can translate that? There are Hebrew-speaking people here, yeah? Tov is good. Lev.
Heart.
Yeah, the normal understanding is heart. But when Lev is used in holy sources, in the Torah sources, it is completely understood to be talking not about the heart, the physical heart, but to be talking about the mind, not the brain, but the mind. And so what it's saying essentially, and Mishnah, does anybody know what a Mishnah is? Mishnah is a party. So when you say Tov Lev Mishnah Tamid, you're saying a good mind is a perpetual party. If you have a good mind, if you think well, your life is a perpetual party. So we're in Adar, and that's really what we want for ourselves. We want to be in a perpetual up, yeah. And so I want to just like do a little exercise and find out what those words mean so we can understand how to apply it to ourselves. So we just said Lev means mind, but what is Lev Tov? What is a good mind? So a good mind is living with reality and not with our own hobgoblins, not with our own fears and our own terrors or our own pettiness. Lev Tov means a good mind, a mind that lives with reality. But what's reality? Reality, I think you can define reality by two things. Reality is knowing that I am constantly in Hashem's presence. I am constantly in Hashem's presence. Hashem is never distant from me. I'm constantly in Hashem's presence. And secondly, every single thing I do, every small thing I do, let alone every big thing I do, is intensely important to God, and God is intensely interested in it. And it's very, very, very important to him. So what is Mishta Tamid? Let's translate that part. What is a constant party? A constant party in Jewish understanding, a constant party is not giddiness and frivolity. A constant party is a happiness, that a constant happiness that comes. And how does it come? It only comes by living right, by doing whatever I know is right at this particular moment. And then the next minute doing what's right in that moment, and the next minute doing what's right in that moment. And so if we think about Purim, the Purim miracle itself, for example, you know, they were living under Haman's threat. They were living under Haman's threat for almost a full calendar year, from Pesach, when the news leaked just before Pesach that Haman had gotten approval to wipe out the Jews. And what was the date that he picked? They knew the date. The date was 11 months later, on Adar, the 13th of Adar. That was the date that he picked and the month that he picked. And the Jews had not been aligned with Hashem. A few were, but the vast majority were assimilated and not aligned with Hashem. And then when they heard that they were under the threat of death, and Mordechai told them, why do you think this is happening? This is not happening because it's a political intrigue. This is happening because you distance yourself from Hashem. You distance yourself from being part of Hashem. When you pull away from Hashem, you pull away from everything. And they heard, and they did teshuvah. They corrected their ways. And not only did they correct their ways, not only did they go back to the ways of the Torah, but any single Jew could have gotten out of the threat of the death penalty, of the massacre that was going to happen on the 13th of Adar, simply by changing his religion, simply by officially abandoning Judaism. And not one of them did it, because they knew at that point political reality, political shmiality, doesn't matter. Political reality does not run our life. Hashem runs our life, and we are not separating from Hashem. Even though it seems like we could save our life by giving up our Judaism, we're not going to do it. And we're going to stick with Hashem, and we're going to hope that he takes care of us on the 13th of Adar. And that's exactly what Hashem did. He orchestrated the entire year. It was, if you in the Megillah, if you read it with commentary, there is no book that is more fascinating to me than the Megillah. It is like it's just amazing. And you can see how Hashem orchestrated the whole thing. And so they put their lives on the line for almost a whole year, not to separate from Hashem. That's Mishta Tamid. That produces a tremendous inner happiness when you put things on the line, but you are not going to separate from your source. You're going to do what your source says. Okay, good. In a tiny little way, I just did it this weekend, and there were so many cogent reasons not to go to New York. So many cogent reasons. But I had a bracha from the Rabbi, because I'd asked weeks ago before all these other things came up, and it didn't make any sense to go. It didn't make any sense for major reasons. I could be blowing major things in my life by going, and things that I would be very unhappy with could have resulted. And I said, and I decided, you know what, Shlomo Yudas, when you get a bracha from the Rebbe to do something, it never works out from you if you don't listen. It does work out if you listen. So but like this, it's reality. And we went down to New York, and it was excellent. It was excellent, and it didn't do none of the bad things that I thought would happen happened. So we have to cling to reality. We have to cling to the source of our blessings. We have to cling to the Rebbe's prophecies, and we have to cling most of all to Hashem, because Hashem is our everything. So I'm going to turn off the recording and ask if anybody has anything that they